Okay, here we go with part 4 of CAD exercises. And before I start modeling this one in earnest, I'll go ahead and show the drawing for it. And actually, there's a couple things that I want to address with this before I get into modeling this guy. Again, I'm going to try to model it probably about 2 or 3 different ways, but here we have a 3D isometric view of the object that shows different dimensions. And one of the things that I want to talk about here is the assumptions that we make when we look at this thing. So this looks like it's pretty straightforward, but really when we talk about hidden lines and views, these things will come into play. So what I'll do is I'll just go to my part here that I have drawn as one option, and I'll change the visual style to wireframe. Now these are always good because it gives you better looks at the part depending on what you're trying to do. I'll orbit by shift and middle mouse button. And really, what I want to pay attention to is this kind of space down here. I'll go back down here, and I'll go to visual style, and I'll change with visible with, shaded with visible edges only. You'll see how we have this right here, and I'll go back to home. So now if I go to my second version here, and I switch to that, and I go ahead and change my display settings, my visual style here again, the wireframe, you'll see that there's a little gap right here. And so, one of the things that we want to think about when drawings, now this isn't going to be a discussion on drafting practices, I can do that, and maybe I will do that as well. But one of the things that I find interesting about it is that if you look at both of these parts from their default view, unless you saw the hidden edges, you wouldn't be able to see the gap that's there in the back. And so generally, without going too far into it, you'll see you have the hidden edges there. Without going too far into it, generally it goes with, if things look like right angles, or if things looks parallel, or things look perpendicular, than they generally are. And the idea is that if there was something extra to be assumed there, then it needs to be shown. So, like with this one here, when I go back and the general thought process is that if there was something different from the assumption, then that should be indicated either by hidden lines or visuals or things like that. So if we take this back to the image here, the fact that I have this 10 gap dimension here, I wouldn't assume that it would cut through all the way, although some people might think about it that way. And generally the idea is that if there was something different than what would be assumed, then I'd have to indicate that. Now, that's a very, very general way to kind of look at this stuff. And if you actually talk about proper drafting principles, it gets a little different. But just wanted to go ahead and mention that. But actually, now let's actually just go ahead and get back to the part itself as I run my mouth. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start a new window here. I'm going to go ahead and just save this first, just so I can have a part for it. So I'll say part 04, option 1. Again, I'll just have my captures in here. I'll just go ahead and hide the panel. Get that out of here. Okay, and then I'm actually going to have to flip back to this a lot with this one. So basically, I'm going to think about how I'm going to draw this part. And what I'm thinking about with this one is I just like to take the outside profile, and I'll start with that. So I'll just start with this. This is going to be 50 by 40 by 10 by 10. So I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to create my sketch, and I'm going to pick this plane. Remember that it really doesn't matter. And I'm going to go with the line tool up here. And again, I talked in a previous video about the importance of setting your origin point, or how that can speak to design intent. But I'm going to stick to this just because I want to go ahead and get it close to here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw it. Now, one of the things is that whenever I'm starting these sketches, I don't always have to draw them perfect. I just try to get my general shape and then just go around. And one of the things which I will talk about is you'll notice how I was putting these perpendicular auto constraints. Now, I could talk a lot about auto constraints and how they're useful, or something they kind of get in the way sometimes. And actually, this part will give me a good chance to talk about that. But for right now, I'll generally just go ahead and lay out the part. But I do want you to make sure that you pay attention to the auto constraints that are going here, because sometimes they can cause you grief. All right, and I'll pull back into that. And there we go. All right, so now you'll see I have a lot of perpendicular and parallel auto constraints, and this is actually one reason why I kind of like to take different ways for laying these things out, but they'll work for our purposes right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and start putting some dimensions here. Oh, and always watch out for what you have selected, because those will go automatically sometimes. So I'll press escape here, press escape to make sure I have nothing clear. I'll go back to my sketch dimension tool, and I'm just going to go down here and I'm going to start putting in these dimensions. I can put in the numbers right there. That's going to be 10. That's going to be 10. We're still in millimeters and stuff. I'm going to do this. This is going to be 50. And I'll pull this from the bottom, and I'm pretty much just kind of going wherever I want to go with these 10. Okay, so now that these have been kind of separated with how I dimension these, I'm going to go ahead and add a coincident constraint. And remember, we can attach constraints in a lot of different ways. I'm going to control select both of these lines. I'll go up to my constraints, and then there will be a collinear. So I'll do that, boom, and it'll snap to collinear. Also, please keep in mind that I am still in the coincident constraint indicated by how my cursor is black, so I can press the escape key. I'll go back to that, and then also we can kind of drag these around and things like that. So I actually like to kind of get my drawing started and then reposition stuff, but as I said before, kind of the perpendicular constraints are nice, but sometimes they can kind of get in the way. But now I have to finish and look at how this guy is set up. So that's 10, 10. Okay, cool. I'll go back to that. So then what I'll do is I'll put in a couple more dimensions here. I'll put one from here to here. I'll make that 10. And then I'll put one from here to here to make that 10. And then I'll make, this is supposed to be 40. Ooh, I'll hit escape out of that. And then hopefully, actually, there we go. Okay, I can pull that down a little bit because it'll kind of calculate as it's going along here. And then I'll go back to my dimension tool. Oh, and I still have that selected, so I'll press escape to get out of that. Deselect everything. Again, be very careful about having options selected because I'm going to do that a lot because I do it all the time. So I'll go back to my dimension tool, click this edge, and click this edge, and then I'll go here, and that should be 10. And then I think that we're fully defined. Oh, we're not. So again, you'll see when your sketches are fully defined that they'll turn black. One of the things I'll do is when I see something that's not fully defined, I'll kind of drag it and see where it moves. So then I can go here, dimension from here to here. Oh, oops. Again, because I picked the line. Dimension, line, and then point. There we go. And that's going to be 10. Cool. All right, there we go. So we've got that. I'll finish the sketch, and then I have my profile, and then I'll go back and I'll check to this. This is going to be 30 deep. All right, and I'll hide that guy. So I'll go to create, I'll go to my extrude tool, I'll go to this guy, I'll select it, it's selected automatically because it's the only sketch I have. I'll set it to 30 millimeters. I'll go ahead and go here. Oops, and I left it in the visual style, so I'll take it back to shaded with visible edges. There we go. And then what I will do is I will go down here. Actually, I'll check against this here. So I'll need a 10 by 10 here, and here I'll put these cuts in there. All right, so I'll select that face. I'll create a sketch on that face. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and draw a couple rectangles here. And then these should be lined up with that. Now these are still zoom in a little bit with the mouse key. I can kind of pull these around and stuff like that. I'll go ahead and use some constraints here. So I'll make these equal. All right, and then I'll make this one and this one equal as well. And then I'll make these equal to each other. There we go. All right. So now I'll dimension that as 10. Okay. And then what I'll do is drag these back and forth. And then again, we can always use constraints to kind of share dimensions between stuff, and it does go back to design intent, but since I'm doing these, I'm just going to go ahead and make these collinear. There we go. So now all of these should move together. Now I could think about with design intent if I wanted to line it up exactly in the middle, but I don't feel like thinking that hard about this one, so I'm just going to go to my dimension here and my dimension here. Oh, shoot, cancel. There we go. I will go from here to here, then I'll put my 10, and then there we go. We'll finish sketch. There we go. And then I'll go back to my 3D view, and then I'll have the part like this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my extrude tool, and I'll go here, and I'll go here, and I want them to go in this way. Remember, we can do negative. So I could just say negative 10, and then leave it at that, because then it should clean it up. But what I like to do is, again, to talk about design intent here. I can say extent type to object, and then I can say it just to this face right here. So it cuts right into there like that. Boom. Okay. And then I'll need to add that little rectangle up here. And there's a couple different ways I could do it. I'm actually just going to flip this around. Shift and middle mouse button to rotate. I'll select that face. I will create a sketch. And then actually I'll pull this down, middle mouse button to pan the view when you're looking at a sketch. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a rectangle from here to here. And I'll finish the sketch. Then I'll have that there, and then I'll go ahead and do the extrude. Now again, one of the things that Fusion does that I haven't seen in a lot of other CAD programs is how it'll kind of analyze the lines in the sketch and just have it pull forward from that. So I'll select this face here, and then I want this to go that way. Now also notice how it's going to be negative. So you can drag it, but it always corresponds to the number. Let me go ahead and put -1, 0. There we go. And then also you have your operation, join, cut, intersect, new body, new component. I guess I'll talk about components at some point. But right now, and this is a technique for when you're modeling advanced things, you can always do the join or cut whether you want it to take away or add. But intersect can also be interesting as you're trying to create complicated 3D shapes by the intersection of two 3D shapes, and also new body can also work as a setup for that. But we'll save that for another time, and we'll just say join. And then we'll hit OK, and then boom. There is our part. So one of the things about this is again, I want to give some different looks, but one of the ideas with this is what's our plan for how we want to create this guy, right? So what I did this time is I just took this outline and just built from there, and made my adjustments with my constraints and all that stuff. But another way that I like to approach objects is either modeling from what I like to call the outside in or inside out. So meaning that I could start with the form and then take material away until I get the shape that I want. Or I can start with a smaller piece and then build until I get there. And really, again, this is just to illustrate the different ways of that we'll do this. So what I'll do the first time is I'll go for the outside in approach, which actually I like to use a lot. But let's go do this. I'll go here, and then I'll go ahead and just save this now and get this out the way. If I can get my cursor to where it needs to be, I can save. And this is going to be part 04, option 2. I guess I can capitalize that O. Okay, there we go. All right, so going back and looking at my starting image here again, I noticed that my external dimensions are 50 by 40 by 30. So I'm just going to start with that rectangle. Now, one of the things is that when we talk about how we express design intent, sometimes breaking it up into multiple features can kind of help you grasp what's the more important parts about your design. And if you know there's stuff that's not going to change, here I'm making my initial rectangle with 40 by 50. If you know stuff that's not going to change, you can make that early in your design and kind of make your dependent features reference off of that. How you set references is going to be very important, or very helpful if you want to do some design. I'll go ahead and do my extrude here, drag it out to 30, and then boom, I have my box. So then what I can do is I can basically just start cutting out space like I'd want to. So I'll go ahead and look back at my piece here, and a couple different ways I could go about it. But I think what I'll do first is I'll just take these cutaways right here. So what I will do is I will go to this face and I'll say sketch. And I'll just start with some rectangles. I'll go from here to here, and then I'll go for the line. I'll go from here to here to here, and then I'll go straight up. Now, one of the things that's also tricky is when you start getting constraints, and you got to be careful drawing stuff because it'll add some auto constraints in there. Now, this isn't going to hurt me too much because this is still what I want. But when you're drawing more complicated sketches, you want to be careful about the auto constraints that it adds. All right. and I'll tell you about how to. So now we're to that line. I always like to do closed shapes, but it's fine. All right, so I'll hit escape. Um, that's all right, cool. Actually, I still will. Old habits die hard. Let me just put a line right there. There we go. Not gonna make a difference, but I'll know. Okay, so then I'm just gonna go ahead and finish putting in constraints. I'll hit D to hotkey for the dimension tool. I'll make this 10. I'll grab this one here. Also, in addition to making stuff collinear, sometimes what I'll like to do is I'll just use construction lines. So since I want to keep these like that, I can just go back and I'll change this to line type to construction. And then what I'll do is I will, actually let me just change this first. So if I go here as it's currently set, I change it to 15. Oh, it kept it vertical. Yeah, okay. Well, okay, sometimes it'll move it. But that's also interesting too because it's interesting how to move stuff and things like that. But even if I do move it 15 like this, yeah, it still moves and shifts like that. But what I want to do is to kind of force it, I'll put a vertical constraint here, and you'll see everything kind of turns black, and that kind of enforces that. I could have made these collinear, but a lot of times I really like to use construction line to go ahead and kind of infer constraints that are hard from that I can't build explicitly. So I'm going to continue from that. There could be some thoughts from design intent whether I want to specifically design from this edge or put it from this. So another idea is to keep in mind here is that when we think about the importance of dimensions in our design, defining this void as 30, then saying I want this distance here to be 10 could give different priorities. Now, since this is just a computer design and we're all thinking from the same thing here, it's not going to matter. But when you think about these things, those are things you can think about when you are thinking about where you put your dimensions. I'll finish here with the 10. Then I'll go back to this guy here. There we go. I'll make that 10. Then I should be able to pull that up here, make that 10, and then I think this is going to be my last one. I could do I could do another center line here if I wanted to. Really comes down to however you want to lay them out. Come on, there we go. That guy. There we go. 10. Okay, cool. There we go. So now I have that. All right, I'll go back to my home view. A lot of times after I've added, like made it changes to it, I'll go back to a home view to make sure I get a good kind of view of it. I'll go back to my extrude tool. I'll click here. I'll click here. I will drag it this way to kind of help it a little bit. I think sometimes when I'm setting things, sometimes guiding it, at least getting it like a good start in the direction I want, helps with the math, I believe. It's set for here to cut. And then I will go to extend type and I will say all since I want to cut all the way through. And then I have that. Oh, actually, I put that too short. So actually this will be good so I can say I change that. So I can go here, edit my sketch, and actually I put an extra line in there that I didn't need to. So I'll delete this and I'll go back to this edge. There we go. And also what's interesting is, especially when you're working with sketch edges and you're kind of like trying to see how stuff kind of like lines over and stuff like that, we can always go to the bodies here and we can turn it off. So that way I can just see like exactly where my sketch is. And actually this is a projection line that we have in there. So actually what I can do is I'll select this, I'll select this projected point, and can I make them coincident? Boom, and there we go. And then we have our bodies in here. So again, another thing which is generally good to do is to control the visibility of various objects. Am I missing a line here too now? We'll finish that sketch. There we go. Okay, cool. There we go. So now I edited that. Okay, so now let's go back and let's check our thing here. All right, and then I'll need to do a cut. I'll need to do a couple cuts here. So I'll do this one first this time. I'll go to this face, create a sketch off of that, pan it down a little bit, and I'll do a line from here to here. Now, one of the things, again, with the same, just to kind of highlight what I was saying earlier is, one thing that Fusion does that makes me kind of nervous is generally anytime I want to do like a cut or an extrusion, I want a closed feature. But Fusion will do stuff to where it'll kind of take in context the parallel faces you have. So if I hide my bodies again, This is my only line here, but you'll see how it kind of highlights here. This just kind of makes me nervous because of my experience with other CAD programs. But again, your first job is just building your object the way that you want to, or getting your object built to the dimensional constraints. So, you know, whatever gets you there. And as long as it's valid and accurate, I think you're good. So I'll finish the sketch here. So what you can do with this is that if I go to my extrudes, I can just click this, and I'll just bring that back -20. So just basically the difference is that I just didn't do a full whole sketch for that. So again, I could gripe about that in a lot of different ways, but it as long as your part's solid and reliable, you're good. Okay, so I'm going to create the sketch here, and I'm basically just going to do a repeat of what I did before here. I'll just draw this. I'll draw this, and then I could actually I'll do construction lines again. I'll go here, here. Ooh, I don't like that. I don't like that perpendicular. Although it's probably going to mean the same thing. So I'm actually going to Control Z undo. So this is what I'll do. So sometimes one way to get around auto constraints, what I'll do sometimes is I'll just draw some dummy points and assign them manually. So even now you'll see how it's trying to apply that parallel constraint. One way you can get around this is if you can just draw them at an odd angle like that, and hit my check mark so I go to my new one, or if I'm in a situation where I am going to have an auto constraint, let me hold the control key. And then once I move it around, it's not gonna show the auto constraints anymore because I'm actually holding control. I let it go, and then they'll come back. So I'll just hold control for that one. Also, this is also a common one here where you want to be really careful about your parallel constraints when you're drawing sketches. You want to be deliberate when you're drawing your sketches because auto constraints, when it's actually trying to help you, can actually over constrain your sketches, or can be how you get in some of those situations where it's like it seems like everything's okay. Be very, very mindful of your auto constraints. I'll go ahead and put that there. The funny thing about auto constraints is that I'm going to go ahead and make these construction lines, and I'm just going to go ahead and coincident to all these points. And actually, let me go ahead and make these uh, vertical while I'm at it. And then we go escape. But the funny thing about auto constraints is that as much as I complain about them, I always end up using them. So I never really truly have the heart to turn them off. Um, but depending on what I'm doing sometimes, and actually for the next iteration of this, I'm going to intentionally draw it without auto constraints and then go ahead and clean everything up. All right, so I will go ahead and actually, I'll just go ahead and dimension these. Put that's going to be 10. This is going to be 10. And then this one is going to be 10. And then I should still have my left, right, yep. And then again, I could design and tint this if I wanted to, but 10s from the edge is going to be good enough for me for this. And I'll finish the sketch, and then there we go. All right. And then I'll just do the to the edge again. And I'll go here, here, and then I'll actually just go ahead and go extend type to object, and then I'll go back to this face here. Boom. Okay, cool. So now we have this guy. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'll do one more, and I'll just do it from kind of an inside out. And you can kind of mix and match, just again, just different looks here. So what I'll actually do here is I'll start from the center here. So I'll start, well, not from the center, but from the interior piece a little bit. So going back to looking at this, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to draw this interior. Yeah, I'm going to draw this main body right here, and then just add these other pieces, just to kind of give us a little bit of a different look. So, yeah, this is the way I'll do it. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll actually draw this one as my main face. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go Control Sketch, start a line. I'm going to go here. Now you'll see how it does like the horizontal and vertical. So since I don't want to do perpendiculars this time, I'm just going to hold control while I'll put these here, and I'll just lock to here, and then I'll press escape. Then what I'll do is I'll just go back and put my horizontal and vertical. Also, I could have just drawn a good old-fashioned rectangle, but actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to delete this one because, no, actually, no, I'll do this. I'll leave it like this. All right. So then what I'll do is I'll dimension this one, and then this is going to be 20 high, and then this is going to be 50 wide. Okay. So then I have that, and then I'll check this against my thing here. Yep, this is going to be 20 by 50, so I'm basically doing this middle part here. All right, so then I will extrude this guy. Forget that it auto selects. I want that one. And then we're going to take U30. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to this face here from the underside, and then I'm just going to draw some rectangles. So again, you can always kind of like take advantage of how you see certain things to go ahead and lay that out. Cool. So I'll zoom in on here, and I'll just go ahead and make all these equal. Make U equal. I'll make U2 equal. I'll make U2 equal. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of all these faces and then make them equal. Uh-oh, or is it the last two? Okay, I guess it didn't want to take that. So we'll just say this one, make U2 equal, and then I can make these two equal. And then I'll hit escape, and then we have all those from the corners. I'll dimension here. Oh, you always got to make sure you have your selection clear. And then I'll select this one. There we go. Make that 10. Boom. All right. Finish the sketch there. I can flip that around. Well, actually, I'll leave it on the underside. Again, manipulating your view, rotating, definitely a useful thing to be familiar with doing. I'll extrude here, select all these faces, and I'll send them down. Oh, actually, well, yeah, you actually shoot this up. So actually what I want to do here is, I forgot, you want to be explicit with this. So actually what I want to do is I'll delete this one. Oops, not the calculator. I'll delete this, this, and this. So actually, this is what I'll do. I'll just leave those. Tried to be cute and forgot what I was doing. All right, so then I'll just say line, put you here. I'm just gonna go ahead and leave these without constraints. There we go. And then what I'll do is I'll say horizontal, vertical, vertical, escape, highlight this point, highlight. Oh man, actually. So this is actually kind of a good thing to kind of highlight too, because because there's extra lines here because a lot of stuff has been happening. So let me just hide these bodies and see what I'm looking at. So somehow I got some lines there. So if I delete that one, okay, and then that's going here. Oops. And so it's still giving me the edge of it. So I'll make the body here, select this edge, and then that point, and then I can make them coincident. So again, it's also really, really easy to get lines on top of each other. So again, being able to manipulate your bodies and look at what's going on is extremely helpful. All right, oh no, I want to grab this one and this one. There we go, make them equal. Boom, all right, there we go. There we go. So now what I can do is I can go to my extrude tool, select these faces, and then go to 10. There we go. Okay, so what I can do here is I will select create a sketch here, and then I'll go ahead and draw something from here to here. The particular, I won't even, well actually I do want to put the line there this time, because what that will do is if I can select this edge and this edge and make them equal, then there we go. So again, Fusion gives you a lot of situations to where you don't have to put in a closed path, but I like to a lot just out of habit. So then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and extrude this guy. Excuse me. And then we'll take him -10. Actually, you know what? I will actually do the same thing this way. So I will go back to this one, edit feature. Well, actually, you know what? Let's just do it a different way because I'll have to do two anyway. I'll go back to this side, extrude, and then also it's always interesting how it sets references. And I can hit escape so I can look at it in 3D. Hide the body. And then you can kind of want to see where stuff kind of like links to and stuff like that. Oh, there isn't a line there. All right, so I'll do line. There we go. All right. And so you can kind of play with the visibility here a little bit. I could even maybe. And then remember, we can also make sketches visible as well. So I can hide to this, make that sketch visible, and then will it let me do this? Equal. I think is it equal to it? No, it'll make me do a projection. All right. So it's always interesting to see what it'll let me get away with. But in the interest of finishing this part up, I'll just go ahead and hard code it in 10. But again, associativity between sketches is a cool thing to do, and I would recommend doing that. It's just that I'll have to talk more about the projection another time. So I'll go here and finish this up. Then I'll say -10. If I can get that. Okay. Make sure I still got one body. Yep. All right, cool. I'll go back to my normal view. Home. And then I can say sketch. And again, I'm just going to keep the third line so I can just make these equal to each other. Oops. Okay. So I'll click the equal one here and then here. And then I'll dimension this for 10. Would be nice to put some more associativity in there, but again, just wanted to show just kind of different looks. I try not to get too caught up in what's the best way, because depending on what your changes are going to be, you may want to look at it a little bit differently. Then I'll go back to this face, and then I'll go ahead and put a rectangle here. Finish the sketch. There we go. And then I'll say extrude. Finish that and finish that. Okay, there we go. And there's our part. I didn't even save this one. And then this will be part 03, 03, option 3. Capitalize that O. Okay. So yeah, so here we go. So again, just wanted to again reiterate the fact that there's always different looks, and what's better can often be a perspective depending on who you're working with or what the best practices are and stuff like that. All right, Revolve's up next.